Good morning, everybody. It's Brian Caprice, and this is our Monday morning market breakdown. I hope everybody had a nice holiday weekend. I know it's a little bit of a relaxing time for people. I know for myself, springtime is always crazy with my son's youth sports, and this was an off weekend, so it's nice. My voice is probably going to hold this weekend. If you guys have been following us, the last couple of weeks, last week we ended up having 4 games in 4 days. So it was a bunch, and my voice was not quite here. It is a little bit better this week, although I don't know where you guys live in the country. I know some of us, those folks in Chicago had snow last week, and somebody else yesterday said that they were skiing out in Colorado. And Maryland is basically, we are in the pollen dumping time. So everybody's car is green and yellow, and, you know, allergies are fun here. So welcome to a new week. Hopefully it's a good good start for you guys. All right. Before we begin, let me go through just a few things. I'll tell you who I am if you haven't been here. I'm one of the instructors at Major League Trading as well as the founder of Major League Forex. I've been trading since the tech bubble, so I've been around for a while, seen a lot of different things, seen multiple crashes. I'm part of that kind of generation that when you talk investments, it's kind of an interesting subject because the market has crashed twice on us within our first 15 years of working. So seen a lot of different things. I actually got into the markets just after the crash had started before the tech bubble, and I live in the DC area where the tech bubble hit home. Dad worked for IBM at the time, so definitely very familiar with what it does to you. And after many years of doing different things, was trading currencies, options. I ended up moving into the advisor division of one of the big three banks, and really learned that everything that we think that those guys do, they don't actually do. And if any of you guys are on this line they come from that industry, you know exactly what I mean. I was very surprised that, I didn't learn anything about trading when I got there. I learned how to follow directions, but not really how to trade whatsoever, and that was my biggest problem, is that I knew how to trade. And I left that industry because I wanted to help people learn how to do it themselves. And I realized that, I know there's that saying that if you want something done, do it right, yourself. But in investing, I truly believe that that's something that people should do. They should understand, even if they aren't the ones hitting the buttons, they should understand what's going on. And I really developed a big passion for it. I traveled around the U.S. and Canada for the last 8, 9 years, and really help people learn how to do this themselves. Obviously, you can see I have 3 kids. I stay very, very busy. I created some courses called the 30-minute trader as well as the 5-minute binary courses. That's my daughter out there in the red in the middle of the picture. She is almost 11 months now, so she's crawling, she's eating. Last night she ate more than I think both my sons put together. She loves pasta. And then my 2 twin boys, it was their birthday. They just turned 9 on Friday, so birthday weekend as well. So I stay super busy, and again, I love doing these presentations to give you guys new ways to look at things and new things to try. And that's it. So we'll move into our disclaimer, and then we'll jump into what we see for the week. So trading on Nadex, as you guys know, involves financial risk and may not be appropriate for all investors. The information presented here is for information and educational purposes only and should not be considered an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any financial instrument on Nadex or elsewhere. Now, any trading decisions that you make are solely your responsibility. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results, and Nadex contracts are based on the underlying asset classes, including Forex, which we're going to predominantly be talking about today, stock index futures, commodity futures, and economic events. Now, most importantly, understand that trading can be volatile and investors risk losing their investment on any given transaction. However, the design of Nadex contracts ensures investors cannot lose more than the cost of the entire transaction. Basically, whatever it costs you to get into the transaction is the most that it can cost you, no matter what happens with the underlying asset. Amazing, amazing, amazing. If you guys don't understand that fully, it's amazing. Okay. Now, Nadex is subject to U.S. regulatory oversight by the CFTC. Also very important, if you don't know what the CFTC stands for, look it up. Go online after this presentation and see who else they oversee. Pretty interesting to see Nadex up on that level and realizing how great of a place it is. Okay, so as I do each week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my top 3 for the week. Now this is an interesting week for many reasons, for trading and non-trading reasons. As far as number 1, 2, 3, I'd say Friday the 26th is probably the biggest opportunity for a mover. U.S. has advanced GDP on Friday morning, and like I said, we'll see how busy that is. I don't know what what you guys do in your spare time, but Friday is also, I believe, the release of the Avengers Endgame movie, which I'm pretty sure all eyes will be on that. Disney stock will go crazy. It'll be one of those days. Wednesday the 24th at 10 a.m., CAD has their rate statement and overnight rate. It's not expected to move. We'll go over that in a second. I'll show it to you. But one big thing I think is coming is because we've been bouncing interest rates up and now we're talking about down again. Canada hasn't quite done that as much, and it's interesting. My wife has a condo that she purchased a couple years ago on pre-sale, and it's just coming down to the final close and occupation, and she has to get external financing. And one of the interesting things about it is right now, the variable rate is actually higher than the fixed rate. And when we talked to one of the people up there, the brokers are like, "Yeah, the rates are getting all funky and crazy," and I was like, So this one I think has some potential to move this week. Like I said, I don't expect a surprise rate change, but I think their language about what they say could lead this thing to move 40, 50 pips, pretty short time frame, okay? Last but not least, Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're a West Coaster, this is definitely something you can get into after work. East Coasters can get into it before bedtime. Aussie has CPI, and these nighttime trades with Australia or with in relation to like Chinese news or New Zealand news, they've really been great trade. They've really been great trades at night. I just can't say enough about them. They've been consistent, and again, because there's not a lot going on, there's been plenty of time, and you can use some of the smaller binary contracts. If you'd like to, you could even go as low as the 5-minute, unless you have a good strategy for those. Maybe a little bit quick for you, but there's 2-hour binaries and the nighttime regular daily expiration binaries. Been some nice setups. So if you're not looking at these, definitely do yourself a favor. Make sure you're in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, and check out the movement there. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to drag this over here. If you guys aren't familiar with Daily FX, this is an easy site that kind of goes over news for the week in a more kind of laid out. Those were my top 3, but I want to make sure you guys know about the others. Go to charts and calendars. Go down to economic calendar. Okay. Make sure you click over here on the filter. Again, we don't need all this news. I'd get rid of the Mexican peso. I do leave China in there. And again, I do this because it affects the Aussie as well as the New Zealand dollars. And then I make sure that my time is set correctly, right? I am in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. And then you go to weekly view. Oh, I want to make sure that I get rid of low as well, because there's a lot of low things. All right, so you can see Monday, not a very big day. I think a lot of people are going to be, a little bit slower today, just with, Monday morning. You had Easter. I don't think everybody's even back yet. I know a lot of people, at least for us in Maryland, it's spring break, so a lot of people are away right now. So we'll see what today provides. I think a lot of the movement has already happened overnight. Going to Tuesday, you can see basically tomorrow night, Australia. That's the only high kind of news release. We have the price index for the U.S. new home sales. Those aren't typically huge movers in the currency market. They may affect a little bit. Some of the builders and things if you guys are following indices, but for the most part, I don't think there's anything really earth-shattering. Consumer confidence maybe for the euro, but again, it's not a very big number. Going into Wednesday, we do have some news. Again, that's the CAD news in the morning, and the CAD news is by itself. It's not counterbalanced with U.S. news, so you do have the ability to kind of play that in a few different ways. There is also crude oil inventories that you can trade Nadex-wise as well. Going into Thursday, we have some Bank of Japan data, which I definitely think could Aussie yen, pound yen, dollar yen, kind of give us some movement there. And again, that's basically Wednesday night into Thursday morning. But again, rate decision, it's not about changing the rate because Japan will not change the rate, but it's about the statement and what they see. Now, we do have durable orders at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. That could have potentially been one of the top 3, but I put it at about a 4.5. Because there's not a whole lot else going on that morning, I think that could probably move it. It's a combination of durable orders and jobs. Initial jobless claims, that tends to be a big one because people look at that and they say, "Oh, this is what's coming," and the news, if it just seems like it's slightly bad, the news is going to make it seem like we're already like 6 months into a recession and the whole world is ending. That's what the news tends to do with us. All right, and then going into Friday, you guys can see. It says loans for house purchase. I'm sorry, right here. I don't think there's going to be a huge mover for the Swiss, but I do think that GDP annualized with the U.S. Obviously, this is a big thing for the president. They're talking about how 3% should be reachable and attainable, and that's kind of he jumped from GDP over to the stock market as a gauge of the economy, but GDP is still GDP. So we'll kind of see where it goes from there. All right. So that is your week, your news for the week. All right, let me bring us back to some charts. All right, so if you guys aren't familiar with my style of looking at the charts, you'll notice that I have a bunch of boxes and lines, and I'll kind of explain those as we go through. And you'll see some things that are like, why is this over here? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's coming from other time frames. Okay, I also use these charts for what we call it. We call it chart school over at Major League Forex, and we do it basically every night of the week. And so if you see some things and it's kind of like, I'm not sure why that's there, don't worry about it. I'm just going to give you guys some basics for the week. So looking at this pair, we had, and I'll make this a little smaller for you, we had this kind of sell area here, and it had been respected a few different times. Up here, up here, up here, up here. This one didn't even make it. This one gave it a kickback before it finally burst through the top. And what it did is, this is a pretty sneaky little grab here. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this over here, but you guys see this kind of section right here where the price came down, kind of went lower and then dropped? Well, I'll put this here so you guys can see it, okay? This is what we call a wick over wick area. And these are kind of hidden turning places that a lot of people don't catch. I'll make it blue so you guys can see it. There you go, it's this line, right? These are hidden areas where price can definitely turn around. They're typically high quality turning points. And it drives some people nuts because they're in the middle of nowhere. It's not support and resistance. And you'll see that that's exactly what it bounced off of. It just grazed it and turned and pushed back down again. Now, it is a little bit risky to place any type of a trade off of it, particularly because we have this zone that was right here, right? You were kind of wedged in no man's land. But what it did is it hit, respected, and now it's turned and has pushed deep back into the sell zone again. So where it is right now, for me at least, it's not tradable because we are in kind of a zone here, we're in a zone here, and that zone kind of came off of this piece. Now, I do expect us to have a green day here because, again, the way the market moves in two processes, you have impulse and then you have correction. Well, this thing pushed all the way up. This is a little bit far to be called, an impulse move, right? Or I'm sorry, a correction move. It's about 76 pips, and the daily ATR is only 57. We've broken a level here, and pushed all the way down. So we're approaching this magic number over 79.58. I'm kind of watching out for that one. As far as the week goes, I think it needs to clear this area before I'm really ready to take any type of weekly stab on it. As far as daily goes, again, we are pushing down into an area. These areas down here, though, are more targets, not necessarily trigger points. The trigger points were up at the top. You'll see it kind of up in this area. So for me right now, I don't necessarily love anything, and you'll see that for the week, there wasn't a whole lot of Aussie news. Best way to play this one, though, is going to definitely be tomorrow night at 9:30. Depending on where we line up, particularly if it's somewhere over in here, that's going to give us a little bit of a telltale sign of where the markets are going, okay? Let's go down to the big brother, or I guess I'd call it the little, I don't know, maybe little brother. The brother that doesn't move as much, okay? The brother that's associated with gold. So you guys will see down here in this chart, these are the lines we drew last week. We were right here, I believe, last week. We said we saw price go sideways, and it did. It bounced off the bottom, came up, bounced again, came almost to the top, came back down, went right back to the middle, grabbed this little area, and then broke out the bottom. Now, I like this type of break because it wasn't just a sideways kind of blow break. It did actually force it to come down. It did break some zones, and then we kind of went sideways and stabilized. Now, this is where we kind of expected price to happen, to bounce to. A lot of times, and you guys, I'm sure, have heard this before. Old support becomes new resistance, old resistance becomes new support. That's what kind of happened here with this channel, right? Price broke out of the channel, kind of came back, and immediately pushed back down again and formed what we call a single wick against a wall, okay? Let me load this to change it to gray so you guys can see it a little bit better. You guys see this here? And then again, what happened is price came up, tagged it, and started to push back down again. So this one is in a similar position as the Aussie yen. Again, there's some zones down here that I'm a little bit cautious of. And again, I left these lines on there so you guys could see the channeling of it from last week. But you'll notice it got very, very close to its daily selling area and it started to flip back down again. So in this one, I'm a little bit more bearish, kind of centric on this. I don't know that I'd throw a weekly on there yet. But again, I do like how this has kind of come up. It had a little bit of a failure to go higher. It did turn in the top 33, top 30% of kind of this range between the buying and selling, and then prices coming back down again. So areas that I'm looking for still are magical for me right now is this 70.26 to basically 70 area. This was the start of this kind of bounce area, this round number right here. It also is the entry into this kind of big green kind of football field, basically, right? I mean, it's what it could be, right? Football field to put some stripes in and everything. This is that one crazy candle, and I think if price can get back down to here, I think it has a slippery slope to the downside. So I'm kind of watching out for that one. This would be one I'd play more on the kind of a shorter term basis. And like I said, because of the channeling effect, how it followed all the way up, right? Once we broke here, there's a lot of steps, right? We're at this kind of step right here. There's another step here, a little one here. Here's a little hidden zone here, and then here. So there's a lot of things that kind of has to break through to the downside. But again, this was the entry to the trade right here to this blue box. It came up, retested, and now has dropped, what, about 21 pips down? But we'll see. Again, this one I think is going to be a bit slow today. Remember, this one is also correlated with gold. So if you see any gold news, make sure you jump over and check this one out. All right. Let's drop down to Euro Pound. So Euro Pound, again, this kind of 86.50 area was what we call a kind of a special area that we're watching out for. It had been it's the bottom side of this last kind of split here, and this was one of those. This is what I talk about going sideways. This was in our chart school that we talked about. We're forming a trend, and it dropped, but then went sideways through it. Where we are now, we are still. I mean, you guys can see we're very, very much up on this cliff, right? We've pushed higher. We've pulled back a little bit. Didn't go as low. We're making another valid push higher here, but not a lot of conviction, right? I mean, you would assume this would have a bit more conviction, being that it's the euro as well as the pound with everything we have going on with news. There is a little bit of pound this week, but this pair has been predominantly dominated by Brexit. Okay, if you guys are not familiar with what Brexit is, it's probably the largest currency event we've had in the last 10 years, right? And you can see that this back and forth between this upper area at 86.75 and this lower area at 84.80. This is Brexit, where we were basically crossing this in 1 or 2 days back and forth. Now you can see that the candles have gotten very, very small, right? The bodies are very, very tiny. Okay, and the ATR of this is only 58. And you guys can see some of these big ones here, right? I mean, like this big candle is 150. 3 times, what we're seeing right now. Now, I personally still don't think anything is truly decided about Brexit. I think they know what they're going to do. I don't think they've told the public what they're going to do. And everybody's like, oh, I hope this happens. They already know what they're going to do. Okay, it's been too long. They can yell back and forth. They all have a plan of what they think they can do, and they know who's going to vote for what. This is a pair that I think we're going to have to wait for a little bit of a catalyst. And you can see it's kind of just lazy, kind of, little kind of bounce back here. I'd marked off this kind of blue zone waiting for this. I do like this zone down here, all right? This 85, basically 86, right? 86 is a little bit above the front run it. In here, it gets kind of messy, right? I mean, there's really not a whole lot of conviction. And again, Easter weekend, not much going on. So, lower time frame, you guys can see we did pull back into this 86.62 area. So we have a potential for this to turn and flip and head back down into this 86.35 area. But it's only about 30 pips worth of movement. On a daily Nadex strike, be cautious because they're 20 pips apart. So this would require, unless you're doing an at the money, it will require at least 2 strike price drop. And I don't know that on a Monday with not a lot of news, we can get that much of a catalyst. Now, you could be looking at more of a weekly position. Last week, if you had taken a weekly position, though, you guys can see it really didn't, count 5 back, and we're over here, right? It really hasn't moved much. It's moved a total of about 30 pips in a week. So again, the best way to play something like this is look for when we have news and look for some type of reaction for it, okay? As far as big news for the week for the pound, let me see. There's some Euro stuff that's kind of minor, and besides that, there's really no kind of blockbuster information this week. Loans, yeah, there's really nothing that's blockbuster this week for either pair, so again, we're getting at that stage where obviously it's going to move back and forth, but I just don't see this being one of the larger catalyst pairs to be moving all over the place, okay? Now, Euro Yen is kind of the sibling to that. Euro Yen is one of those pairs that's either feast or it's famine. You guys can see we talked last week about this kind of upper sell zone, right? If you go back 5 days, you'll see that this is where we were. And we mentioned that, again, this was very, very much like the Aussie Yen as kind of a hidden area, right? It dropped. There was a little bit of a hidden pattern, and then it dropped again, and it came up, retested, drove through. And last week, we talked about this, and it dropped about 95 pips to the downside. Okay, you guys can see over here, had a little bit of basing, and these were target prices for us. And it came through, and since that time, hasn't done a whole lot on the 4-hour or even on the 30-minute, right? We've hit the target and kind of just bounced along, right? Now, what I'm seeing here is a couple of different things, okay? When this initial news burst came down, it came back up to this level, okay? It came through, came lower, lower, lower before bottoming. This is what we're sitting inside of, right? Oops, not a triangle. That would totally confuse everybody. This is kind of the sideways movement, right? Down, and then again, it even consolidated more and it's kind of in here, right? Kind of been in this little zone, right? Kind of wedged in about a 16 pip zone since the new spike happened. So what we need to see is some conviction. Now, things that I'm looking out for is you have this big area to the top side. And when I say big, I mean, you're talking about 50 pips. So it is definitely something that is tradable to the top side. Or we're looking at a push into this zone and a break of 125.60. So if you guys are familiar with how to set alerts in whatever software that you're using, you could potentially, grab something, right? And again, we want to know when it breaks kind of the low. I want to say break the whole zone, but when it breaks the low, give yourself a little bit of room. Do something like this. Set an alert. Let me pick a bright color so everybody can see it. So set it to where breaking 125.63. Not to trigger trade, but to alert yourself that price has finally pulled back, broken through, made a new low. It will probably retrace back up again as well, and start looking for shorts to go back over into this 125.10 area. Unfortunately, right now, again, it's making, the highs are not as high as these two turning points. The lows are not down here. So again, it is truly sideways in its description. And you can see we have conflicting signals. We have what's called a downtrend setup, right? Impulse, correction, impulse, correcting up a little bit, waiting to push impulse back down again, probably into the 125-ish or 124th area. Lower time frame, we have sideways up confirmed and then sideways up. So really nothing on the near term on this one. So there's not a whole lot we can do with it. Again, it's kind of a wait and see here or wait and see here to figure out, okay, it's now trending. Now we can jump in, okay? Going down to euro dollar. Euro dollar is one of the big boys. Again, euro dollar has bounced back and forth. Okay, if you guys remember last week, we were talking about these lower areas here, right? We had seen price wick down and turn and flip for this gray area. Well, guess what it did off this gray area? Okay, not only did it take over this little bit of kind of target from this, what we would call a racetrack, it hit the second target and is now kind of pushed back a little bit. And again, it's sideways. It's the same, more or less the same pattern, right? Price came down, it popped, and then bottomed, and is now stuck within this sideways range. Okay. Now this one has about 44. It's not quite as large as the pound yen to the top. I'm sorry, the euro yen to the top side. But this one will tend to have more movement and be more reactive than the other one will, particularly to US based news. Okay. So where we are to, on the daily, if you're looking, again, when this drove back down again, it drove into this area where we have the impulse and correction. So it's in the correction area to look for more buyers. And again, this candle respected it. So not a bad place to take off. But again, going into Friday, it was more of a target than it was anything else. And this is kind of, actually, this should make it a little bit easier for you guys. But you guys can see, as far as, major turning points on the 4-hour right now, we're pretty much clear up until, again, set yourself a trigger of 112.85, looking for kind of this really the 113 area to start looking for some shorts. Okay. As far as downside, again, we have an area on top of an area, and we're about 45, almost 50% of the way, about 45% of the way through this. So we're kind of in no man's land. This green or this blue line right here at 112.51 is 50% from top to bottom. I typically like markets that are trending, not necessarily smack dead in the middle. Okay. Let's go and look at pound yen. So pound yen. So this is a measured move we talked about last week for potential. This pair, we're down to 111 ATR. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's basically the average range for the day of what we could see. During Brexit, back in this time when we were bouncing back and forth, okay, this was up to about 155, 156. We're down to 111. So we're seeing a consolidation in price on this one. And we're kind of driving through. Again, I'd like it to break this. You guys see this turning kind of pivot right here, this 145.27 to 144.79. If we can get below this, then I'm looking for entries when we get back into this 144. But again, it's got to clear this area. There's a little bit right here. I really, really, really needed to touch this zone before I'm willing to start looking for longs. Okay, and again, selling area top, buying area at the bottom. You can see we've built some basing, right? Prices dropped on the 4-hour, based, came back down and then based again, based a little lower, and then dropped again, and now we're stuck in this base. So lower time frame, I do think we're starting to kind of get to the exhaustion phase over here on the bottom. You can see on the 30-minute, it's very similar to what we saw before, but not quite as clean as the last two euro pairs. It's just sideways. And again, Easter weekend, going into Monday morning, it really hasn't decided on a trend yet, but you can see even going back into, into Friday, it was pretty low. And again, going into the holiday weekend, very explainable. Okay. So this is another one of those ones that's kind of a wait and see. Again, these charts are set up more for overnight or potentially swing trading. Even on the lower time frames right now, there's just not giving us a whole lot of effort. And again, it is what it is. It's just, not a big news week for these two pairs. This one can move though. It can rocket. And again, if you hear anything or see anything on the news this week that mentions Brexit, definitely come back and look at this pair. The only two zones I'm looking at right now potentially are 45.93 and this 46.56 area as levels where if it comes back up that it can use that as a selling point to the downside. Bottom side, I don't really like a whole lot. You have a little bit of a gap over here. Just not a whole lot of conviction. A lot of wicks on the downside. Kind of an ugly pair right now, for lack of a better word. Going down to pound dollar. So pound dollar, okay. Pound dollar made an interesting kind of bounce from us. We were talking about how it was pushing lower and lower and lower and lower. It was starting to consolidate. It's down to 93 itself. It did bounce off the top sell area. We have a little bit of a speed bump right here coming in at 129.38. On the lower time frame, you guys can see, okay, we had an area here, this yellow line that we were worried about, right? It was a piece down here. We had seen it, hold twice. It was actually from all the way back here. And this is one of those situations where the old becomes the new, right? This was an old kind of selling area, and then it became a buying area here. Went through here and tagged the bottom area, but then it became a buying area here. It became a speed bump here, and then it was finally broken again. Okay. Oops. All right. So what has happened here in this one is it broke through and it gave us for me, what I would call a great selling area. A great selling setup, but it wasn't something that we would take. And here's why. Okay. We have a lower buying area below, and you're talking about a 19 pip range. Okay. As you know, Nadex strike prices on the dailies are 20 pips apart. So it was not even one entire strike price. I love when prices break through prior zones and come back up and retest. It's one of my favorite triggers that exists. The problem is, and you guys can ask yourself and answer this, do you want to be selling in an area of buyers? Or even vice versa, ask yourself this, do you want to be buying in an area of sellers? And the answer is typically no. And that's what we ran into here. Had you sold, yeah, it came down, it touched this area and bounced back up again. And now it's kind of wedged in between these two. So for me, I'm looking for some type of a breakout above 130.20 or a breakout below 129.60 on this one. And again, it's kind of sideways right now. This one will start picking up when U.S. traders get online, when the dollar prices start, kind of bouncing back and forth. Okay. As far as taking this one much shorter, I'd be a little bit hesitant on it. If you guys, again, it's been driving down, it's been pushing down, and again, things will stay in oversold, for a long time. But this is a pretty nice little kind of speed bump or a little hiccup here, followed by this lower area at 128. So if anything, I am probably a bit more biased, probably to the top side, but I don't actually have a setup right now until we break one of these two areas, whether it be the selling zone up top or the buying area below. All right. Potential sell side. Yes, potential sell side. There, guys. All right. So, dollar CAD. Dollar CAD has been kind of literally bouncing back and forth like a tennis match. Okay. If you look over here, it's kind of like I can't make anything out about what this trend is, right? I mean, here's the buying area in the green, and here's the selling in the red, and it's just been going bink, 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 bink. And again, it hasn't gone as high, but it's hit, come up, hit, come up, hit, come up, hit, come up. And now we're in the area where it looks like it wants to potentially hit again, right? So if you drop the lower time frame, right, a couple different things that we've been able to grab over here on this one. Okay, price has been coming up, and again, over here, it's just the top, it's this piece, but this is what we're looking at, the descending wicks. It's been a very nice sell area, right? Price came down, and actually it hit an old area here, came back up, hit it again, dropped back down again, took over these 5 green candles, went a little bit lower, grabbed this, hop, ran into this area. Boom, dropped again a little bit lower, right? It broke this area, grabbed this area again, popped back up again, did not go as high, pop, didn't go as high again, and is starting to enter this big piece. So for me, there is some possible sell side in this one. I am definitely a little bit more bearish biased. But again, we got to wait till US traders get online. Okay, on the lower time frames, you guys can see that we had a kind of a push up and a base, right? But we are at that base right now, and this is this is something a lot of people make mistakes with. They're like, oh, I see it, it's flipped, it's a double top, right? Here's your double top. The entry's at the neckline, right? We should be going short. Well, guess what? Everybody knows you should be going short right now. So this is an area where there's a lot of traps, and a lot of traps tend to be, particularly when you're in an area of basing, right? Here's your 1, here's your 2, there's your entry, right? And what you'll see is this poke down and then pop, poke down and pop. And what it's doing is it's waiting for, it's trying to catch people, right? And again, very, very common that this happens, okay? So we like to see some type of a confirmation. There's many different confirmation tools you can use to the downside. But for me, this is definitely something that I'm looking for. It's about 90 pips, and there is CAD news this week. So this is something you could potentially look at, maybe with a weekly. A weekly binary position wouldn't be bad on this one. But there is also red news on Wednesday. And this was one where you can really play either one with any US-based news or any Canadian news. Oil will also affect this one slightly, although the correlation is not as strong as it used to be. Okay. Let's see. Dollar Swiss. So dollar Swiss has been pushing, grinding, pushing, grinding, all the way up here. Something I talked about with my students is, again, you typically need some type of a retrace, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, very, very large impulse correction. Now, it's kind of in no man's land, and even on the daily, you can see price really hasn't been up here for a while in this 1014 range. So a little bit harder to find zones and turning points in this one. You can see that we've had a bit of a failure to go higher, right? It spiked all the way up, it pulled back down again, and then started to put in these flat greens. And a lot of this, I believe, had to do with the holiday weekend. And we'll see kind of when the news agencies kind of start popping, start coming back online and start giving us headlines where it's going to go. I mean, it is sideways. Okay, there's a little bit of selling pressure on the top side. There was a little bit of a basing right here, right? It came back down, it touched this base before it pushed back up again. So, and this is a lower, I guess a higher low, right? So it's technically trendless right now, but again, still looking for this more to the downside to kind of, you guys look at this on a larger time, right? It doesn't spend time up here. This is kind of your middle ground, right around this 99.60, 99.50 area. So I'm looking for somewhat of a retrace, and the speed of this, definitely a bit more bearish biased. And remember, you may be one of these people that you think this is going to continue to go higher. Any trade that you make is solely up to you. I'm just giving you my opinion that I do feel that this is due for somewhat of a correction, and it would be somewhat of a dollar weakness correction, right, to the downside. Now, there is Swiss news this week as well, and that will affect this pair. Last but not least, let's go into the dollar yen. So the dollar yen, as you guys mentioned, as we talked about last week, this is one of those ones where we really didn't see much last week, right? We were right here last week. Last week was the 15th, right? The 15th is right here. So it's moved a whole, let's see. It's moved 17 pips in a week. Okay, so this one has not been the big mover. And you can see we finally did push through, and we talked about this last week. We had this blue bar, this blue selling area. It pushed slightly higher, hit the sell area, and then stopped dead. I mean, it just didn't move, right? And what we've been doing now is literally just this, right? A little bit of sideways movement. There was a little bit of a base here, and price has come down and touched it and has now stopped, okay? This one over here looks more like kind of like one of those echocardiograms, right? Your heart, this boom, 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 weekend, boom, and flat. So no trend on this one. Things that I'm looking for, again, there's a very large daily sell zone right above where we are at the 112.11 area. I'm not too concerned about it pushing through that. It's held pretty well, and the area is, it's a pretty nice looking area. I think I'm looking for somewhat more of a retrace to kind of retake over this this kind of area from 111.73 back down to 110.90. I think there could be some potential for some trade, for some movement in here. But we need to know when the engine starts, and the engine's not started yet. So just keep an eye on that one. What I would do is do the same thing, grab a horizontal line, put a horizontal line probably in the middle so you have some time, right? At 111.77, where this line is right here. What I would do is mark that off, have it send you an email, depending on how well you know your software, have it alert you, send a text message or an email or whatever it is when price is finally starting to grind through and break through that level. and then look for potential trade opportunities to the downside of it breaking and collapsing this structure back down into kind of the 110, 111-ish, or like the 111 to 110.80 area. For me, the target is going to be over here where this gap previously was at 110.84. Okay. All right, that's all. Like I said, holiday weekend, traders aren't back. Let's see where the money takes us. Make sure that if you're trading a trending strategy, that you have a trending market. If that is the case, which again right now we don't necessarily have any of that. Make sure you do have it before you start placing a trade. So if you'd like to see, guys, you can always go over to MajorLeagueForex.com. There's a picture of the website. Click on this Discord button, or you could click the chart schools at night. Discord is where we do most of our talks. If you have questions, you can ask me there. You can always send me email at support@MajorLeagueForex.com. And if you are already on Discord, you can send me a direct message at MLFX space Bryan number 1492. That's my tag over there. You guys can grab me, and you'll see me inside the Discord room answering questions as well. So thank you guys so much. It's a little bit after 8. Good trading today and this week, and I will catch you same time next week. That's it. Take care, guys.